All right, welcome back to the How to Relate podcast. I am here with Heather Kaplan.
Hi,
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing great.
Thank you so much for coming on. We met because a friend of the podcast, Andrea, is on your directory called Lean 9, and we'll get into what Lean 9 is in a second. I love the work that you're doing with Lean 9. I think it's super important. So if you want to talk a little about what Lean 9 is, how you founded it, what your mission's all about.
Sure. So, Lane 9 is on a mission to reduce REDS and eating disorders in women's sports. And we do that by raising awareness of what REDS or relative energy deficiency in sport actually is, how it presents for an athlete, and how this impacts athletes across all levels of sport, by which I mean high school, college, elite, sub elite, professional, recreational, every day. You might not consider yourself an athlete. But all of those levels of sport, we see REDS. And through different seasons of life. So, again, high school, college, post college, maybe adjusting to life outside of structured sport or high level sport, maybe pregnancy, postpartum, perimenopause, postmenopause. Relative energy deficiency is an imbalance in energy intake, energy output. And what happens is some of the body systems start to break down because we don't have enough calories and nutrients to sustain our health. What we do through Lane 9 is, again, try to raise awareness of that by sharing athlete stories and by just talking about things that feel a little taboo, like periods and mental health and why we're in sport and how we're treating ourselves in sport and things like that. We share athlete stories. We talk about REDs and periods through all of our channels. We just want it to feel like a thing that maybe the more we talk about it, the easier it gets for an athlete to bring that up with their care team or with their coaches or their teammates or all of the above. And we built a directory that has providers across the country of multiple disciplines. We have dietitians, we have mental health therapists, we have physical therapists, we have coaches, and we have primary care providers, all of whom specialize in treating women's health and sport.
Incredible. So, how might someone start to explore REDs for themselves?
Mm.
I think at one point it was almost well, they're highly active and losing a period is just normal. And
That still happens all the time,
sure.
unfortunately.
Yeah. So how might someone start to go with like, ooh, that might be me?
I think what people resonate the most with in the stories that we share from various athletes is just that feeling of, I'm trying to do the right thing, but it's turning out to make me feel worse than I was feeling before. And there is sort of this period where when someone might be restricting or getting a little bit more rigid with food and exercise, they start to feel quote unquote better, or their performance might improve for a short amount of time. But that's often followed by injury, loss of a period if that hasn't already happened. It can also be delayed puberty in younger athletes and starting to feel a little off. So maybe they're not recovering as well from their workouts. Maybe they're not performing as well in normal events like games, races, etc. They're starting to feel really preoccupied with food. So something I hear all the time in my practice is like, well, I just think about food all the time, or I'm always kind of thinking about my next meal or snack, and starting to notice little things that kind of our body's way of saying, like, I'm not healthy anymore. Like things are starting to break down. So little niggles or injuries. A bone stress injury is certainly a huge red flag and part of like the REDS presentation. You could also have a muscular injury. It doesn't have to just be bone stress injury, but the most common things we see and are kind of looking for from a clinician perspective is something that might feel like a disordered or really rigid relationship with food and exercise, starting to see little signs of the body breaking down. An injury is a later sign of that, but earlier signs might be delayed recovery, trouble sleeping, not feeling as strong in workouts or performances, and that loss of a period or irregular cycles when previously they have been regular.
Okay. So it sounds like that someone can maybe start to self-assess for some of these symptoms. The tired and wired feeling, I think at one
Mhm.
point that was the term adrenal fatigue had really come on
Yeah.
the scene. Like, I
It
think
had a moment, yes.
that it had a moment. 2018 was really an interesting year with all of this because I feel like that the functional health, keto, paleo, like all these things
Yeah.
like really started to come out on the scene for CrossFit athletes, especially who were like zone diets and paleo and like, but then all the other athletes too. It was like, oh,
Yeah.
should I be eating that way? If these elite athletes are eating keto, should I be doing that too? So I
Mhm.
think that really, again, I blame 2018, but I'm sure this has been going on.
So I would blame 2010 in my experience. So if someone's a little
Okay.
older, like maybe 2010, 2012 really resonates, but certainly 2018. I mean, we launched Lane 9 in 2017. And that was the beginning of me going into private practice. And my co-founder, Alexis, was in a graduate program where she was learning about the female athlete triad, which is now like housed under REDS as a kind of umbrella term. Um, and we're both, she kind of came to me and was like, I just feel like I'm just learning about these things, but I was a collegiate athlete and like, where was all this information when I was in college? And to this day, it is 2025. We still hear that from collegiate athletes. Like, why isn't my coach talking about this? Why don't my teammates and I know about this? And there's just a lack of information. There's a lack of access to information. There's a lack of awareness. Like, I don't want to assume ever like any malintent on a coach's side or athletic director side or physician side. Like, there's just not as much knowledge out there as we wish there was. But yeah, I think like when we launched in 2017, it felt really hard to find conversations about this. It felt hard to find content from athletes about this topic. But it was real easy to find someone talking about keto or paleo or their clean eating or, like insert whatever the trend of the day is.
Because I think about the rise of information and diet, right? So podcasts, YouTube, like all these
Yes.
Instagram, like I think all these things have been information channels, and they've also been ways for people to sell their product or their version of what it's a way
Yeah.
that is the paleo lifestyle. And it's like, hey, there's a bar for that, or there's a protein powder for that, or hey, look, there's keto and you can take these amino acids to get your protein while you're on keto. Whatever it might be, it seems like that people have been looking for quality information, but it's really hard to know what quality information truly is.
And what came to mind when you said that was they're often looking in the wrong places and they don't know that, right? Like we just have so much access to information now. And I went to school to become a dietitian. I started college in 2004. And I'm like, at that time, we barely had Facebook. We did not have Instagram. We didn't have TikTok. YouTube was not a place you went to like find information like that. I'm not even sure if YouTube was a thing yet. I don't remember. So not to age myself and feel as unrelatable as possible, but like even then it felt like we had too much information about nutrition. It felt like every news outlet, every morning show, every radio show, podcasts were not a thing at the time, but like you had already what felt like too much information. And now we're in an area where it's like too much information doesn't begin to do justice to the way that we are bombarded with like health and nutrition, quote unquote, information, and the ways that it just gets so twisted through social media. And what we've seen for decades, like social media or not, what we've seen for decades is that the person that someone is most likely to trust when it comes to health information is a peer, not a clinician. So that's always been true. And it's just exacerbated by social media. So an athlete might be scrolling through social media and think like, whether we like to admit this or not, I like the way that person looks. That's why I'm drawn to them. Or they have this ability to do this sport, or they are at this level in sport, and I aspire to that. So I trust them. There is not a lot of critical thinking involved, which again, like I can't say we all, a lot of us are like not guilty of this, but a lot of us experience this, right? It's like a human thing that we want to turn to a peer before we want a clinician telling us what to do. So I mean, there's a lot of research that's like, who is someone most likely to trust with this information or this information? If you put nutrition, it's like peer, teammate or coach, doctor, maybe a dietitian. It's like dietitian is like low on the list. And when I talk to athletes for our podcast, what I have heard far more often than not is someone will say, oh yeah, we did have a dietitian come talk to our team, whether that was like in high school or college, and we're all just out here trying our best. Like I've been that dietitian talking to teams, and they will be like, they're telling this story years down the line, but they're like, I had no interest in what that person had to say.
Right.
They just don't, it's not where they're wanting to get information. So that's also a challenge that we collectively are up against.
Oh, so much here. Because when you're saying that more people are likely to get their information from a peer used to be the person sitting next to you in class or as a teammate. Now
Right.
it's the parasocial relationship that you have with someone on Instagram or TikTok.
Mhm.
And if it's someone who's hitting their splits, if they're a runner or hitting the milestones that you might want, then it's going, yeah, it looks like that they have the blueprint that has made them super successful. And I want that blueprint.
Right. Right. Yeah, unfortunately, this extends even to the clinician world. Like, I think that maybe we're not talking enough about the phenomenon of like that coach looks the way or performs the way that I want to perform or look, or that dietitian or that physical therapist. I have heard that bias come out so many times in session, like, or even just a friend saying to me, like, I want to go to this class because or like if I have a class with a trainer, like I want to know that my trainer is super fit or that my yoga teacher is super flexible or something like that. I wish that like more of us kind of had the opportunity or the encouragement to be more critical about those thought patterns instead of just like go to the class and enjoy the class or go to the sport and enjoy the sport. Go to the race and enjoy the race. There is a practice in really honing in on ourselves and our own self-awareness and being really clear on what works for us versus what works for someone else. Like, I don't want to make any judgment of anyone out there doing their thing. If they're talking about what works for them, that's what works for them. Full stop. Doesn't mean it works for everybody.
Yeah, and that's hard because we want to optimize. When you're saying go to the class and enjoy the class, but that class has metrics and it has a scoreboard for how people are doing. It has like, oh, S- Susan got the most reps today, or this person was faster, or this person hit that high rocks in X amount of time. I don't even know what high rocks is still, but
I can't,
apparently it's a huge
I
thing.
can't
And
even speak to it. And I know
yeah,
really nothing.
right,
Yeah.
right.
I mean, I think there is room in our world for, I will say, like, quote unquote, healthy competition. If that's a thing that drives you or makes it more fun for you, I'm all for it. That I don't relate to that. I'm such a not competitive person. I played sports growing up. Like I identify as an athlete. I'm someone who enjoys movement and sport, and I'll be a little competitive with myself. And I'll maybe notice like a little bit of a competitive energy if I'm at a race and I'm like, oh, that person was behind me and now I want to beat. Like I'll see it come out here and there, but I would never put that on the list of things that drives me or motivates me most of the time. So I don't relate to that, but I think that there is room for it in our world. I don't think that it's like a blanket unhealthy thing or unhelpful thing. I think it can be fun, and I think people can get a lot of satisfaction out of that. There's just a lot of room for self-awareness and checking in with yourself of like, does this feel good for me anymore? Am I doing this because it's fun? Or has it shifted into something else entirely? And this is true for sport, it's true for hobbies, it's true for your food and like the way that you think about nutrition, like all of these things. I guess what I hope for people is that they allow space for themselves to be more curious about how's this actually feeling for me? And is this actually still feeling good for me?
I think the competitive mindset, I like to think of it as a tool rather than an identity. So you can use
Mhm.
that tool and not feel like that you have to be so absorbed in it. Like I think, I think of Michael Jordan because he was so absorbed in that competitive mindset that it's
Mhm.
all he thinks about. That is like who he is versus people who are going to these classes and are like, yeah, I was a college athlete. I like being competitive, but I can leave it behind. I can
Yeah.
turn it on and turn it off, and it adds an element of fun rather than a full on, I embody this at all times.
Yeah, I think that understanding the difference between an identity and a characteristic is huge, right? Like, this is something about me, but this doesn't have to be who I am all the time. What we see a lot when we're talking to athletes for podcast episodes or essays is there is a trouble zone where you get too into the identity of an athlete It's challenging when you leave a sport or you don't have access to the sport anymore, or you've entered a level where you feel like you're not good enough to compete with the people around you. And I think the thing that comes up for me the most in this season of my life is I wish I had done more things just because they were fun, not because I thought I had to be good at it in order to keep doing it. And I think as an athlete, that's a really challenging space to find, especially if you're in higher levels of competition or you're competing at the collegiate level. Like there's a lot of pressure on an athlete. So that competitive drive is a skill and they have to hone that skill. But then learning how to, like you said, turn it off or see it as more of something that is part of you, but not who you are. It's really hard and it's really important.
Well, especially as you're working with athletes who are making their whole lifestyle revolve around the sport that they're playing.
Right.
Then when we're talking about food, you're thinking about that for when you're playing or for when you're on the court.
Yeah.
What would you say diet actually means?
Okay. So probably what most people think of when they hear the word diet is something restrictive and structured and maybe rigid. So they might think of I am on a diet or I follow a diet or I need to diet. So it could be a verb or a noun, right? When I think of diet and kind of I don't know, actually, if you were to look up the word diet, like what's the first definition that comes up? Like there are different ways we can define this word, right? It doesn't have one definition. But one way we could think about diet and one way it is defined is a pattern of eating.
So we're all on one.
We're, we're all on something. Yeah. There are patterns of eating that are more restrictive, that follow certain rules, that for some people can be more health promoting depending on their needs. Like, for example, a nut free diet is health promoting to someone who is allergic to tree nuts, right? But I don't need to be on a nut free diet. I'm not allergic to tree nuts. Or a gluten free diet, pattern of eating, is helpful to someone who is allergic to gluten or has an intolerance in some capacity. But I don't need to be on a gluten free diet, right? So there are lots of ways to define it. And again, it could be a verb or a noun, but my hope would be just like collectively, we first think of it as a pattern of eating and that it doesn't have to be a restrictive pattern of eating unless there's something that you might need to restrict for a food allergy or health condition.
Yes. So it's really finding your own individual blueprint for what this means for you. So it's a definition that is very broad in general.
Yeah.
Everyone has their own individual way of working with it.
Yeah. And it can change.
Yes.
Going back to that identity piece, your food preferences can change, your likes and dislikes can change, the way you eat throughout the day during different seasons of life can change. It's like it's a fluid, flexible thing. We get into trouble when it's the opposite of that. It's a rigid set of rules, it's an identity. It's something that feels like if I don't stick to this, everything feels off. I have no flexibility outside of this pattern of eating. There are lots of ways in which our diet impacts us, and some can be health promoting and some can have negative health consequences.
Yeah. What are some frustrating points in food world?
Oh man. Where do I start? I think the things that I get frustrated by right now, I will say in this year of 2025, are kind of the tendencies to get information from places where, like, in the back of our minds, we know this is not a credible source of information, but it still feels tempting to just follow that road. So that can feel frustrating. There's just a ton of misinformation online and a lot of irresponsibility around kind of talking about food and health. I don't want to always assume malintent, but sometimes there's just pretty obvious malintent. Like, depends on the source. But it's frustrating and I think I feel the frustration from clients too. Like, what am I supposed to believe? Like, there's so much information out there. Like, how do I know what's going to work for me? And again, I think that's been true for many, many years. Like, we just have a lot of information about nutrition and probably way more than we need. I feel frustrated, if not maybe annoyed by the ways that like diet culture just repackages wellness every 3 to 6 months. Like, I don't know, maybe more often than not. So there's this kind of whiplash effect of like, is this healthy? Is this healthy? This was healthy, but now it's not healthy. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. The goalpost is ever moving. It's never quite enough. But that is the design of diet culture, right? Is as long as you feel like you're not doing enough, you're going to continue to buy the thing and buy the supplement and do the program and get on the diet and get on a different diet. You're not going to be satisfied because there is no end goal. It just moves all the time. So I feel frustrated, to say the least, about that. Um, and I I mean, I don't know if this is something that frustrates me, but I just wish that there was a world in which it was a lot more kind of normal, I guess, to feel like chill about food, to just kind of like relax a little bit about it. There's certainly things for us to know about nutrition that can be really helpful, but we've just taken it all like way too far.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much here. There was a point in time where people were talking about nightshades,
Oh
and I
gosh.
haven't even heard that term in probably at least 3 or 4 years. But
Right.
we're going, "Oh my gosh, can I eat the tomato? Can I eat the eggplant?" And I'm like, "Well, do you like them?" I don't like, if you like it, eat it. If you don't, put it down. I don't know. Like, it's like, but people were free, like, it's just like this chronic obsessive, "Oh
Right.
my gosh, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing harm to myself?" But I think that it does become like, when I think about obsessive and compulsive actions, it feels like it takes over life, because everything we're looking at in terms of what we're eating is, can I eat that? Is this okay? Do I have to look it up? And there are plenty of apps that will endorse why you need to look these things up.
Yeah. It's so funny you say. I'm like, when was the last time I heard someone ask me about nightshades? Couldn't tell you. But are we getting enough protein? Like, that's the most common question right now. Do you think I'm eating enough protein? Do you think this has enough protein? I'm like, when did this shift? The pro, I need to do better, or maybe I don't. I'm just not in those corners of the internet. Like, I have curated my internets in all the places that I go on the internets to like not have any of that stuff. So
Mhm.
I don't see it. I just hear about it. like, I'm like, oh, this must be the trend on TikTok these days, or this must be the trend on like the quote unquote wellness Instagram these days. It's like, again, the goalpost is always moving, the target's always moving. Like, it's always a new thing, because we don't want anyone to feel like they've figured it out. Then wellness doesn't have like a whole industry. There's always something new. And truth be told, from a nutrition science standpoint, like, we are always learning new things, and it is pretty fascinating. But that doesn't always need to trickle down to the like individual consumer level in a way that like everyone should be thinking about it all the time. I was on a national news show about 7 years ago, maybe. So like a while ago, in the 2018 era, actually. It's funny that you said that. In 2018, I was on this national news show. They were doing a segment on orthorexia, which is an unhealthy obsession with healthy eating. And the host said to me, "But doesn't everyone think about food all the time?" Yeah. As if, like, isn't this so normal to be preoccupied with food? And, you know, as many clinicians in many different contexts would say, if something is normal, that doesn't make it common. Or if something is common, that doesn't make it normal. If something is common, that doesn't make it true. It's just a trend, right? Or it's an experience that a lot of people are having, but that doesn't necessarily make it healthy or normal. If she's asking, like, doesn't everyone think about food all the time? I'm like, well, maybe a lot of people do, but maybe that's also a cue to us that a lot of people are struggling with their relationship to food and with fueling adequately, because we live in a culture that is really obsessive about health and wellness.
The truth doesn't lie in the numbers and how many people are having the same experience. That
Yeah.
seemingly is when it's, hey, I talk to how many people a day, and someone is, like you mentioned, on a diet,
Mhm.
losing weight, on a new workout trend, whatever it might be, that
Mhm.
it does become obsessive.
Yeah.
Yeah, like culturally obsessive, societally obsessive.
And I think what many people have experienced when they do become very interested in health and nutrition, the subtext is obsessive about health and nutrition. It's just a kind of self-perpetuating cycle of like, now I want to find more information. Now I have more information. Now I don't know what to do with that information, but I feel like I'm doing everything wrong. So I need to find more information to make sure I'm doing everything right. But there's no way to ensure I'm doing everything right because now that I've gone through the cycle, all the information has changed. Everything is new. So wash, rinse, repeat, right?
It can never end.
Yeah.
Yeah. How much of your job do you feel like is debunking misinformation?
Most of what I'm trying to do with clients is we'll spend a little bit of time on like, okay, this is a pattern of eating that you've been following for a while. How does it feel for you? Do you feel like it's still working? Does it feel healthy? Does it feel like it's supporting your movement goals? Most of the people that I work with in my practice are moving in some way, they are active in some way, and that's an important piece of their lifestyle. It's also okay if it's not. Totally open to but in my world, that is kind of like who I have specialized in working with. And so we'll spend a little bit of time on like, oh, okay, so you went to this CrossFit gym one time and they said don't eat nightshade. So it's been 5 years since you've eaten a nightshade. Interesting. Well, could we reintroduce that? What would that feel like? Kind of getting someone's like history of food behaviors, food patterns, food beliefs, like that is where we can do a little bit of, myth busting, if you will, or exploring some things that they thought were true, but maybe are not true, or things that maybe like worked for them at some point in some capacity that actually aren't anymore. And it's just kind of hard to be able to recognize that yourself, to see those patterns yourself. But again, I don't spend a ton of time on like the nutrition corners of the internet. So I see less of it. I just kind of rely on like someone bringing it to me if that's what they want to talk about. There are some dietitians, and I certainly want to plug, oh gosh, now I'm forgetting her exact handle, Food Science Babe, who's like doing the disinformation, myth busting, or whatever you want to call it. Like she's doing the great work. So I'm like, just go follow her. She's doing that. She's a great, great person to follow in that context. But yeah, I wouldn't say I do a ton of it in my like work with clients, but we do a little bit of digging into like, okay, if this is a pattern of eating that you're following right now, what informed this pattern of eating? Like, where did this come from? How did it feel at the time? How does it feel now? And just trying to help someone kind of, again, bring that awareness to like, does this actually work for me? Or did I just get so stuck in a pattern that I'm not interrogating whether it's still working for me or if it ever did?
Mhm. When someone is like super stuck, let's say that it's, hey, you haven't eaten, we talked about nightshade, like you haven't eaten this one particular, you haven't eaten carbs in
Yeah.
5 years.
Yeah. I was
Right.
going to say the most common thing actually is bagels. That's what people are mostly not eating.
Bagels. So there's a okay. So is someone saying I haven't eaten a bagel in 5 years, and one of my favorite things as a kid growing up was bagels and peanut butter with banana, and that is very much true for myself.
Yeah.
But I refuse to eat them now. So what is it like to work with someone who has maybe such a rigid viewpoint on what this bagel means for them?
Yeah. Well, I will say if this is a person that I am in a session with, there is a level of readiness to change that I can work with most of the time. So that's different than someone who maybe comes across content on the internet that's like, you should eat a bagel. And they're like, I don't want to swipe. Like, nope, not there yet. So if this is someone that I'm talking to one on one, we definitely could like dig into that a little bit, especially if it's something that, like you said, was a food preference in an earlier season of life, whether that's as a kid or young adult or whatever. Okay, so this is something you did like at some point. How would it feel to bring that back? What would it feel like to have the option to eat bagels again? And bagels are particularly challenging for folks because I think on a really high level, diet culture is like carb, anti-carb, right? Like that's been true in different iterations for as long as I have like had any knowledge of nutrition. And I remember writing a paper in high school on the Atkins diet. Like this just feels like it was a trend probably at some point in the 90s after the low fat trend, then it was the low carb trend, and it just like has never gone away. You just find it packaged differently now. It just like, look at a diet trend. It's probably low carb in some fashion. So anyway, the bagel is common for that. And again, I'm working with a lot of people who are active and therefore need a higher amount of carbs most of the time than most people do. So I'm working with a lot of endurance sports and high movement sports, etc. So we would think about like, again, how would it feel to have that food again? And depending on the person, I would say like a lot of times right now, they'd say it would feel scary. It wouldn't feel good. It would make me feel a little bit anxious or stressed or obsessive, or I would compensate for that later in the day by eating fewer carbs than I normally would. And we would call all of those things, I would categorize that as a disordered relationship with that food because it's causing stress, anxiety, angst, compensatory behaviors, hyperfixation, all of these things, right? Whereas in a quote unquote normal or healthy relationship to a food, you can eat it and go on with your day, and that's it. You had the thing for a meal, and then you go about your day, whatever the next thing is. And then you have your next meal, and you don't think, because I had this, I should have that, right? Like it's not just this like ever moving calculation. And again, there's always room for wanting to balance nutrients and intake in a way that like feels satisfying and feels good throughout the day. So maybe if I had scrambled eggs for breakfast, I don't also want them for lunch. Like that I understand. But what I mean is in like that compensatory mindset of like, well, because I did this, I can't do this for lunch or I can't have this as a snack. Kind of more from like a rule based mindset or kind of a rigidity based mindset. So I think, I don't know if I even answered original question, but we explore it. And sometimes it takes a long time to do that. That does not happen in one session.
I can imagine because I think of how much of this is what you're trying to untangle is someone's emotions to this, someone's emotions to their rigidity and what the rule means for them. And then how much of this also becomes habit. Like, I think this way, and that thinking becomes habitual. And then this is just how I move throughout my day. I've programmed myself to do this. So, in some ways, it's our habits, no matter how much you want to change them sometimes, it makes it easy for us because it's a way that we default throughout the day. Like, if I am someone who is like, okay, I will not eat that bagel for breakfast, so therefore it's a protein shake in the morning, and I just know every day that's what I'm going to eat. And it takes the thinking out of it. So then it sounds like when you're working with clients, what you're helping them do is create more flexibility around how they think to then be able to do something a little bit differently. And that takes extra effort, energy, and maybe introspection of, okay, hold on, what am I doing when I wake up in the morning and what am I going to eat?
Yeah. And in my earlier days as a clinician, I would often say one of my main goals for clients is flexibility with food and being able to like change what they eat and not have a lot of distress from it. I do still want that for a lot of people, but I don't want to undermine or honor the fact that for some people, for any given reason, like food routines are important. So, nothing wrong with having a protein shake in the morning. Great, if that's what works for you. If you're doing that because other foods scare you or cause distress, even though you like them and would rather eat them, and the protein shake is not satisfying, but it's habit, that's where I get curious, right? But let's say I work with a lot of parents, I am a parent. I understand that, like, in some seasons of parenting or just life, anything you can do to reduce your mental load, do it. Let's do that. So, like in earlier seasons of my work, I might have said like flexibility with food to me is a hallmark of a healthy relationship with eating. And like, yes, that can be true. And that doesn't have to mean that like every meal or snack you sit down, you're like, what do I want? How can I be flexible today? What sounds good? Like, that sounds dreamy, but like not all of us can do that, have that luxury, have as much access to food. Like, there's so many reasons that is like maybe not accessible to people, and maybe it doesn't have to be. So, the things that I get the most curious about now are really like, how does this feel for you? Is it satisfying? Is it coming from a place of like, this other food scares you? Or is it just coming from a place of like, listen, this is what I'm most likely to eat in the morning. Otherwise, I may not eat anything because I just won't think about like having to think too much about it in the morning doesn't work for me. I'm like, okay, great. we can work with that. Like whatever works for you, we can work with that. What I hope is that the more that we work together, or the more that any individual is kind of like examining and getting curious about their own relationship to food, it's that whatever they land on is not something that causes them distress or causes them to constantly question, am I doing this right? Or constantly feel like they have to compensate meal after meal, snack after snack for one thing they ate or didn't eat.
Mhm.
Like it can just be the mental load can decrease no matter what that looks like. That's what I would love.
Even as you're saying that, what I'm almost even like feeling in myself is this decreasing anxiety. Like I'm,
Mhm.
because I can imagine how I'm so focused on this all the time. It's ruling my life. And the
Yeah.
idea I can actually take a breath and it not rule my life, and how freeing that can feel.
All the mental space you get back.
Right. Right. Yeah.
If there's mental space to have. I don't like I have 3 kids. I'm like, there's not a lot of mental space to begin with. But anything I can do that frees up a little bit of space, I would like to do that.
Might be a closet size space, which is great. Perfect. We can start there.
Box size
Box.
space. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, kind of a weird example that is coming to mind for me, like, personally right now, is and this is something I've also seen, there's a Substack that I follow where this person has talked about, like, lunch being just a pain point. I'm like, we don't always have a lot of lunch foods around. Like, we have a lot of breakfast, a lot of dinner, and those are the meals we eat together as a family. I'm the one who's home during lunch, and we, like, pack lunch for the kids, but what they eat in their packed lunch is really not what I would probably wanna eat for lunch, maybe sometimes. So I'm like in this season of life where I'm like, lunch could look like so many different things. It could look like snacking for like 3 hours in a row because I don't have an idea for a meal, or I don't care to like put a meal together. So I just keep having snacks that are satisfying to me, or I have meetings during this time or whatever. It could be that I have more breakfast foods for lunch. It could be that I have leftovers from dinner for lunch. It could be that I go make a sandwich or it could be anything, right? But having that flexibility is kind of a hallmark of like a more flexible relationship with food, or I keep my brain keeps wanting to say normal, and I hate the word normal. So I'm like, not normal relationship to food, but just like more flexible, more low key, Like I'm not going to stress out about like, was that the right lunch to have, or was that healthy enough, or like if it was satisfying and if there was some variety of food and it tasted good to me, then cool. It was lunch. Check the box. Like,
Hard. I'm hearing neutral. I want a neutral.
oh, neutral. Thank
Perfect.
you.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's neither good nor bad. There's no moral judgment on this. It's a
Yeah,
very
yeah.
neutral relationship. Yeah.
Neutral's a great word. It feels like there is this like thing to aspire to that would make you normal, when like I truly like deeply believe that this looks different for everybody. And there's like not one right or wrong way to do it. There's no pattern of eating that's like going to match for everybody. And again, there's no like level of flexibility that works for everybody. It just depends on the person and the way their brain works and the way their life is set up and the access they have and their cultural preferences and their family preferences, like all of it. All of it's different person to person.
Yeah. What are some currently, because this might have shifted and changed too, but what are some mindsets that people are coming in with in your practice and what you're seeing in your work? And if you could wave a magic wand, how would people start to shift their thinking around food?
Yeah. Well, so we talked about this a little bit before we started recording. I was like, how many wands do I get? How
And
many can I have?
any of you want your Dumbledore, you have unlimited access to as many magical spells as
Yeah.
possible.
I mean, this might feel like I just only have one thing to say, but like my magic wand moment would just be like, you think about food less and you enjoy it more. That's what I want for people. And again, that looks different for everyone. I wish that it wasn't so normal for people to hyperfixate on what they're eating or not eating, or so normal for people to obsess about what they're eating or not eating. I wish that food was just a thing we can enjoy, that represents cultural and family preferences, that gives us satisfaction, that can be health promoting. But it's not a thing that we're constantly thinking about or constantly obsessing over like the next right way to do it. Yeah, I think if I had a magic wand, That's what I would hope. And the thing that comes up the most in terms of a mindset, at least right now, is, someone might come to me, we might work together, or we're interacting in some way. And I'll give a very specific example. I, as a sports dietitian, am always trying to get people to fuel around their workouts, right? So let's say someone works out really early in the morning. Oh, I just can't eat before workout. It doesn't work for me. There's this attitude of like, I'm very unique, and this thing that is healthy for the vast majority of active people is not going to be healthy for me because I tried it once and it didn't work, or I tried it this way and it felt awful. I don't want to come in assuming like I have the answer and I'm right and you're wrong. Like, that is not a way to like practice as a clinician. But I do want to get curious, like, does it not work for you, or was it not working in the ways that you tried it? And we could try some new ways. We could approach it a little bit differently and see if we can find a way that's going to adequately fuel your body for the things that you want to do and the things that you like to do. And then they will be more enjoyable and you'll get more satisfaction out of them. And also, bonus, we will treat your body like with what it needs and give your body what it needs. And all of those are hopefully good things. I see them as good things, but I don't want to project.
Yeah. I actually, to this point, if we can get into some, I don't know if like overarching advice or generalized advice is okay to ask for. But let's say
Right.
someone is, hey, I like my 6 a.m. workout class. What would be optimal, or what would be best for someone who works out in the morning and that is their high activity point of the day? Let's say they're doing their heavy weighted workout in whatever class that they're taking. Advisable to say you need to have something before you work out instead of just rolling out of bed at 5:45 to make it to that 6 a.m. class. Asking for a friend here.
Yeah, it's someone I might know.
Someone I might know who might do
Okay.
this.
So the first thing that came to mind is just because you can doesn't mean you should. So a lot of folks, I mean, myself included, like, I can be fasted for a workout. That doesn't mean I should be fasted for a workout. It doesn't mean I'm going to feel great or get a lot out of it. Um, I mean, I'm never fasted for ever. So I'm like, actually, I don't know if I can be fasted. I might take that back. Someone else maybe can be fasted. I can't imagine that. It hasn't happened in decades. So for that person, if they're like, I cannot get up any earlier, I need the sleep, but I do know I can get up at this time and make it to this class, and 15 minutes is like what I can work with. I'd say liquid calories are your best friend, and you can have liquid calories on the way to your workout, and that's fine. Something is better than nothing. Ideally, we're eating between like 15 to 30 minutes before an easier, shorter effort. Those are all relative terms, easier, shorter, relative to the person. There's no like one definition of those terms. If it's a longer, harder workout, again, all relative. I'm probably aiming more for like 30 to 60 minutes before the effort. But if this is a person where like the thing we have to work with is this 15-minute window where they're getting dressed and they're on their way out the door, we can have like really easy to grab foods that are like literally on their nightstand or like in their room. That's fine. I've done that many, many times. Or we're using liquid calories because that's something you can kind of sip as you go. Maybe that's more tolerable on the stomach. You can also kind of eat as you're getting ready. If we find things that are tolerable to you in that time window, and then you get to your workout and you do your thing. Um, Again, a lot of the population that I've worked with are folks who have underfueled to the point that it has had negative health consequences. And so a lot of times what we're doing is kind of replenishing their body and renourishing their body. I don't want to say it's a non-negotiable because I don't like to draw a hard line on things, but I'm like, it's really, really important that we have something before we move, even if it's at 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. or whatever it is. It's just supporting your body. That's what we're doing. So yeah, with that scenario, I just say like, let's brainstorm. Let's come up with as many things as we can try, and we'll try one at a time to see what works, and we'll get you to a place where like we're finding what works for you.
Mm. I like that it is trying things one at a time because that feels way more accessible and
Yeah.
doable and a little less maybe overwhelming on this.
Yeah.
Sounds like having something, any sort of something before movement, even early in the morning, I've seen a lot of people go to BCAAs at
Mm,
the maybe before working out or something on those lines. What are your
yeah,
thoughts on supplements? So, because I can imagine, right? It's like we have athletes, they're gonna supplement for everything.
everything.
And look, I've got suckered into buying things, and I went, "What does this do for me again?" And I
Yeah.
have no idea.
Why am I taking this?
Why am I doing this again? Is this doing anything? I have no clue.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what are your thoughts on some of the powders, the supplements, all of these lines that are coming out left and right?
It's funny you say BCAAs, which are branched chain amino acids. I have not heard that term in such.
I
I
feel like
think there's so many
uh,
like new trends in sports nutrition that that's not the one that has come up. So that was like a throwback moment for me. But I
okay,
will answer more generally in terms of supplements. My very general approach to it is like, if you feel like it's working for you, that doesn't mean we have to stop doing it, but let's get curious about it. Most of the time, the thing we can do that will make the most difference in your performance, output, how you're feeling, etc., is eating enough. And most people are not doing that. So for eating adequately, meaning enough energy and nutrients, your performance will increase. That is performance enhancing, food as a supplement. Imagine that. What I see really often with someone who is like really into the supplement game is they're not even eating enough. So I'm like, these are actually doing very little for you because you don't have the basics down. And the basics is giving your body the amount of energy that it needs. A lot of times with some of these supplements, like you're going to get that from food if we're eating enough food. You don't do any of it. I think there's actually like a lot of really interesting science for a lot of these supplements at a high level of athletics. We're going to see, depending on the supplement, maybe let's say like a 1 to 5% increase in performance. That is when the basics are covered. You see 0% increase in performance when the basics are not covered.
that is a very good metric to go by. I like having something where it's how do you know it's working? And I
Yeah.
think that is a very clear point of how you do know that it's
Yeah. And like, I think it's totally valid. Like, lots of people who take collagen, creatine, lysine, BCA, like, whatever the thing is, beta alanine, like, there's just like so many things, beet juice, cherry juice, chocolate milk, like, whatever the thing is. People will say, like, this really works for me. And I'm like, I believe you. Great. Okay. Like, is this on top of eating adequately, like eating enough? Right. And if it is, like, yeah, there are, again, like, depending athlete to athlete, sport to sport, whatever level they're competing at, like, you will see that there is research that supports, like, some of these things are performance enhancing when the basics are covered. And I hate to break it to probably most of the people listening who are not professional athletes, like, on a lower level, like, the gains are probably very, very tiny, which is not to say they're nothing. And again, like if it's a thing that brings you joy, even if it's a placebo effect, like I'm for it as long as it's like affordable and not a thing that's like breaking the bank or causing you to skip actually eating food, then like, okay, there's room for it, I think. But more often than not, like the basics aren't covered. So let's start there.
it's a supplement for a reason. It's a replacement for a reason.
Not a-
Anything that you want to just leave people with.
you don't have to be thinking about food all the time.
That.
Don't have to be the basics are like, are we eating enough? Are we taking care of our brains? Do we have good relationships? Whatever that might look like. I think like we've just gotten to a place where health is like complicated. There's an entire industry that like benefits off of people being really obsessive about it when really like it comes down to basic things. And that's not to say that we all have access to these basic things or that everyone, can take care of their mental wellness and their relational wellness and their physical wellness in the snap of a finger. Like it's not that. But if I could leave you with something, it's you don't have to be thinking about food all the time.
Amazing. Thank you. And we'll plug Lane 9. Anything else that you want to leave people so they can find you?
No, Lane 9 is great. We're lane9project.org. We have a directory of clinicians and coaches if you're looking for someone to work with. And my website's heatherkaplan.com.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Heather. And again, welcome invitation anytime you want to come back on.
Thanks.
Great. And until next time, everyone, stay connected.